Get started. Just looking at this idea of soft skills, what does it mean? Soft skills, oh, I gotta stay here, sorry. Maybe I'll try this. Doesn't matter. It's just on? Okay. So soft skills are desirable qualities that do not depend on acquired knowledge and are a combination of people skills, social skills, and communication skills, among others, that will enable individuals to navigate through their work environment. What is the difference between hard skills? Often it's said that, well, hard skills are teachable and measurable, where soft skills are traits. So hard skills are often looked at as the skills you need to get a job, like education or training or certification. If you're a carpenter, you need carpenter. Perhaps it's I'm losing my mind here. Can't remember the words. What's the certification for a carpenter? Yes, there's Red Seal as one, but a journeyman status. So there's different certifications that can be achieved. Those are considered hard skills. Or if you say we would like somebody that has 10 years of experience with home building or large construction, that kind of thing, those are considered hard skills. But soft skills are, like it says, traits. So they're the skills actually that you could say we need for success in every job. Whether you're working in an office, whether you're a carpenter or a manager or skilled labor, all of these things, we need soft skills to be successful or to get better at what we do. And obviously the hard skills like experience and certification, those can go hand in hand, but this session, over the years, as we've looked at the agenda, and different ones of us have traveled all across, First Nations land. We've been in meetings and with other groups and seen the way a lot of people work and see often how things could be better, and just see where there's gaps in how we go about our business, even for ourselves, for myself, being in a lot of meetings, being on construction sites, being around councils or community members. All of these things have brought me more awareness about how I can develop soft skills to be more successful and to help people, all right, this is going to be, everything needs a click. So what are the soft skills, or what are soft skills? The list could be never ending. So we're going to look at maybe 10 or so here, and then talk about a couple ways of applying soft skills. One thing I come across often is how do you plan a meeting, and how do you do record keeping for a meeting? So we're going to do that towards the end, but we're just going to review some of these areas that are considered soft skills that are important. I think can be important in any job. If you have questions or comments, I welcome your comments. Participation would be great. I'm certainly not a professional in the sense of having a lot of training in this topic. It's mostly work experience, and I think a lot of us can agree that we've either seen the need to increase our skill level in these areas, or we've taken it on ourselves to increase our skill level in the area of soft skills. So these are a couple. Did I skip that other slide? I didn't go through it. Sorry. Going backwards is. So communication, teamwork, adaptability. So that's your ability to not change direction, maybe change focus. Could be change direction. Problem solving. There's a lot of things that we can talk about and look at that go into each one of these topic areas. And creativity. So these are important, I think, to being successful with such a variety, working with a variety of people in a variety of situations. Just more of a list for soft skills. Work ethic is really important. How do we keep focus for our work? How do we bring our best effort day to day? Whether it's work, whether it's stuff we volunteer in. Interpersonal skills, that's a lot of how we relate to each other. We all have worked with perhaps difficult people over time. How do you make the best of those situations? Because sometimes we don't have the choice of who we have to work with, but we need to make a way forward no matter what the situation is. Time management, that's really important, especially like in the line of work I've been in for almost 18 years. I worked mostly alone. And so when you're traveling week to week alone, when you're getting up in the morning or working in the evening, a lot of it is based on your own motivation. How do you get things done? How do you prioritize? How do you manage your time? And you can't it can't be 12 hours a day all the time, because you're going to burn yourself out. And it also can't be 5 hours a day, because then you're not able to get stuff done. We'll look at some ideas under each of these. Leadership is important. How do you grow into leadership? How do you take on leadership responsibilities? How do you work with other leaders? These are all important things that come up day to day, and it can be difficult at times. Sometimes we have to compromise or figure out, there's some give and take in the way we work with people. Attention to detail, that's a huge area of focus as well. Some of us might be kind of big picture people. We see, we might be working with an 8-unit housing project. Does it matter what kind of bathtubs there are, or what kind of shower taps we use, or sink taps? So attention to detail can be important. So an example could be if there's potentially elders or handicapped people using the homes, planning for a project, things like how you select the taps, if you select taps that have levers versus just turn or single handle taps, or if you're putting like mixing valves at your hot water tanks so you prevent the chance of scalding for seniors and kids. That's detail issues versus the large scale. What lumber yard are we working with? What's the overall budget for the 8 units? So that's just some perspective in how we look at detail. So just getting into one of the first items, communication. Kind of comes in backwards. So communication skills can be oral, so how we talk, or written, and it allows you to express yourself effectively within a work environment. Or we can be ineffective if we're not able to communicate properly. As far as I know, the presentations are going to be posted to the conference website, so at some point, in the days following the conference, I think you can go and download the presentation. So, and if there's any questions, raise your hand or comments on, some of this stuff you guys are very aware of, and I certainly look to you for comments and advice as well in these topics. So communication, clarity, being clear, being concise. What are we really talking about? What is our end goal in the conversation or in the way we're communicating? Having confidence in the way you communicate is important. Respect. Sometimes we have to learn, how we apply respect in community meetings, working with elders, accommodating other people's opinions, but also you have to be able to guide, the communication effectively, whether it's in a meeting. Empathy. So that means being able to identify with other people's feelings or opinions and understand. It doesn't mean you can say to everything, I understand what you're saying or I know what you're going through, but at least being able to listen as we communicate. And I talked about listening. So that's a big part of communication. It's not just what we say or what is said around how do we listen properly and effectively. How do we accommodate? I know sometimes I catch myself listening. I'm already thinking of what I'm going to say next or how I should respond instead of hearing everything that the person might be saying or the people might be saying. So sometimes you have to really focus and think about, what's everything that they're saying, maybe it's taking notes or this kind of thing. And there's different types of communication to consider, like verbal communication, so the stuff we say. Nonverbal communication also can be big. Like if say you're sitting and having a conversation with somebody, or they're coming to ask you a question, if you're sitting like this all the time, does that communicate that you're open to what they're saying? Kind of closed is kind of what it could be, how it could be received. Are you able to have eye contact? I know sometimes with First Nations, not everybody, considers eye contact a way of, being open and receptive. Where other communities, you know that if they never look at you, you're not sure if they like you at all. So there's different considerations, especially in verbal and nonverbal communication. Written communication, how do we communicate in correspondence or write letters, making sure we have all the right information or that it's timely information. Is there forms that we should be using or develop, within our offices or organizations? Is there a standard format, a standard way of, doing or providing written documents? Constructive feedback. How do you elicit feedback? How do you? Sorry, were you going to say something? I think sometimes that's hard, but give everybody an opportunity to provide feedback or to give their ideas. Could go around the circle. Of course, not everybody wants to participate that way. I think if you get to know people, you could address them by name and say, so-and-so, what do you think about these ideas? And I think if you can call people out, you can give value to what they might think about. I know it's sometimes a challenge because there's always somebody who tends to can dominate a discussion. So how do you, and some of that is laying the ground rules before the meeting or before you're having the communication, like if it's a group thing or it's a group meeting or something like that, you can say, you know what, we want to have opportunity for everybody to participate. Not everybody might be there because they want to be. Sometimes people get sent to stuff, and I think we've probably all been in that situation. But I think laying some ground rules beforehand goes a long way to helping people feel included in the discussion. And sometimes people are just there observing, and that's okay too. But we don't want to, like you mentioned, we don't want to miss opportunities for what people have to say. Yeah, the feedback and friendliness, just being open about, yes. Yeah. 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 For sure. Thanks for commenting, sir. Yeah. 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 So it is being webcast, so I may repeat some of your comments just for that purpose, and because I'm mic'd and that's what's being broadcast. So the first comment was about social media. How do we, we can't control it because that's the way the world works right now, but how does that play into the way we apply work, the way we correspond, well, not correspond, but communicate? Because, I've been to many communities where, they can't get a hold of Joe, but everybody knows that they're on Facebook. They don't have a phone, they might not have a cell phone, whatever, there's not service, but everybody's on Facebook. And that's how a lot of communication happens. And so what are the guidelines or policies that can keep it, keep it valuable and useful for everybody? And it was mentioned already that, having that policy, how it gets, just how it works for either the community staff, the politicians, because I know there can be a lot of slander and this kind of thing, and that's hard to deal with. But it comes with the territory, unfortunately. So good comments. Just carrying on in these topics from the listing, teamwork. Teamwork allows you to operate well within a group setting and a workplace to quickly and effectively complete tasks. Some examples of teamwork-related skills: conflict management. That can be huge. That's a whole area in itself. How do you make sure people get heard if there's conflict within a community or within a workplace? Many places have a conflict resolution policy, so people know who they can talk to if they need to, whether it's an official designated person. If you don't like your manager, who do you go talk to, or your coworker? Not saying that we don't like them, but some of these are facts. That there's different people, and we look at things differently. Delegation. How do you split up tasks when there's a big job? How do you make sure stuff happens? How are you able to do that effectively? Listening, again, that's part of all of these soft skills in so many different ways. How do you consider other people's ideas on a team, or how do you make sure everybody gets heard when you're trying to, make teamwork happen in the best way possible? Active listening. Collaboration, that means bringing different ideas together, or can mean in that sense. Cooperation. Sometimes there's a little bit of give and take in the way we work together. We might have different ideas, and there might have to be a middle ground in how we move forward. Can we come to that point properly, and not easily, but in a way that makes sense? Idea exchange. How do you gather ideas in general or specifically when you're part of a team? Is there a way you gather ideas? Can people submit ideas randomly? Mediation, that can relate to if there's disputes, is there a dispute resolution process that can be followed? Some of it can be specific, it can be even legal, or it can be, two people sitting down together and talking things out. Negotiation as well. How do we negotiate whether within our teams for who's doing how much? I know oftentimes when it's a team, usually it's about, you look at stuff, sometimes it's 20% of the people end up doing 80% of the work. Sometimes it's even higher, 10% of the people do. And sometimes those are the people with the most passion or the most ambition. And others of us, we're kind of showing up for work, we're going through the actions. How do we build team when not everybody has the same ambition? And how do we not lose that ambition, or not burn out? Again, I'm asking questions because there's a lot of stuff to consider, and not necessarily having answers, but important things to consider in these different topics. Next one is adaptability and flexibility are related skills and are about embracing and rolling with change. Some examples of adaptability can be curiosity, so people that are generally curious about how does something work, or how do you get a certain job done, how do you complete a project, that kind of thing. Self-management, which is huge for people with a lot of ambition. How do you manage your time, your resources, your life, your other than work life? Sometimes we have to figure out what our boundaries are, personal boundaries, in staying effective. We don't want to burn out. We might be willing to take on a lot, but how do we prevent ourselves from burning out and losing interest? Because sometimes that's the worst thing that can happen for people that are really good at doing things or helping with community projects or work projects, that kind of thing. Decision making, again, what kind of process do you have for considering people's ideas, for moving forward? Do you sometimes it's hard to move forward when people when all you're asked is, what do you think? Because we all think differently, but if you provide options, I find if you provide options for moving forward, here's option 1, 2, or 3, pick one, and we'll work on that way instead of just saying, what do you think, to everybody. How do you move forward in your particular project or discussion? Calmness is huge. I think we've all been around people too that fly off the handle very quickly, and it might not be so much about that situation. Maybe they're having a hard time, but how do you that's important in being able to be adaptable, I think, in different situations, is to be calm. Optimistic. Optimism is huge. How do you keep a positive attitude even in the most negative situation? How do you see, it's not always just like, is the cup half full or is it half empty? Sometimes we have to be very deliberate about making positive steps forward. And when you're making a list of issues, if it's all negative, it can be hard to remain positive. But I think it's very important, in this whole idea of soft skills and leadership. How do we keep everybody, or not everybody, but how do we make sure we're promoting, a positive attitude? Being open-minded is important. We might have our ways of doing things. How do we consider other people's ideas or ways of doing things? We might know what works. That might be our experience, but there can be many other ways to get stuff done or to spread work around. I know sometimes I will just do stuff on my own because I know I can do it and I don't have to worry about stuff not getting done. I know that it'll get done, but I might burn myself out doing it. So how do you let other people either gain experience, gain knowledge from passing on, which one was I talking about? Open-mindedness? Analysis. How do we look through situations to see if they're beneficial or not beneficial? Analyzing ideas or analyzing our approach is important because it might not take a whole team, or what if it could include something legal that makes it completely outside of our ability to approach things properly or to do the job that we need to do. Or maybe we need chief and counsel or our management. There's so many different levels that we work at, and sometimes issues or concerns will make it somebody else's, or could make it default to somebody else's area of management. Self-confidence, again, we've seen that before. Being confident in your experience, and you've had a lot of history doing different tasks or being a part of teams. So don't be afraid to share your ideas. And sometimes, I don't know, that idea of we often say fake it till you make it. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. Sometimes we find ourselves in deeper trouble than we ever, not trouble, but with a lot more work to do than we imagined. But it does help. How do you inform yourself of a situation? Organization is big. How do you organize your effort or your team or the way your personal effort? Could be time, could be resources. Organization is a huge area of consideration. Self-motivation. So some of these come up in all of these different areas. Some of us need a lot of help and motivation from a group around us. Some of us are driven by, we need a job. We need the job we have. Others of us are driven by the passion we have in the work that we do, whether it's in First Nations or being a carpenter or being in management, these kinds of things. What can we bring, to keep ourselves motivated? problem solving. Again, these are, sorry, I'm lost here. Okay, problem solving abilities are a blend of using analytical and creative thinking to find solutions or to find a way forward. How do you keep moving forward with your projects or your issues or the work that you need to do day to day? Lateral thinking, so being able to think even, it doesn't have to be outside the box, but are there different ways that we can think about approaching a situation? Taking initiative, so can we speak up or can we express our ideas or can we do things that maybe help the group even without being asked? Persistence. We have a great idea and we know that it can benefit the community or the work that we're a part of. How can we be persistent without being annoying? Or and I think if you're able to communicate or ask in a way that shows the benefit, it's easier for other people to consider that you're asking week after week or month after month. But if there's benefit and you can list that kind of stuff, it's easier to consider persistence, for sure. Observation, how do we look at stuff or how do we investigate what a job or a project might be, and how does that look to us and how does that look to other people? Sometimes people, obviously everybody has different experience, different perspectives. How do we apply that to the job that we might be or project we might be involved with? Negotiation. So again, there's some give and take. It does take negotiating at times to figure out what our middle ground might be or what a project might end up looking like. So having skill in negotiating, considering all of the pros and cons of any given situation or project is important. And what pros outweigh which cons, which drawbacks are there. Brainstorming, again, having like brainstorming sessions is important. Whether you're using like a flip chart or doing different analysis on solving a problem. Like there's one approach you see used often in strategic planning or problem solving. It's called the SWOT analysis. So it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So if you can list your strengths, whether it's your team or your project, what are the weaknesses that you see? And the weaknesses in the days and months and weeks ahead can be your focus, can become your focus. Opportunities, what can we achieve? Whether it's with a project or with the community, and what are the threats, either to us or to the project? So it's good to go through an exercise like that, and looking at problem solving to, see where we stand or see where the gaps are. Yes. Did you say something? No? Okay. Look like you're raising your hand. Decision making. Sometimes, you have to come to a place where you can just make a decision. You can't just sit on an issue forever and never make a decision. So that's, something it takes to speak up and say, you know what, we have to move forward in some way or another, and here's what we're going to do. And if you have to come back around, then that's how it goes. Creativity. So soft skill. Creativity is a broad type of skill that can help you develop innovative solutions to problems at work. So here's some examples. Inspiration. How are we inspired to do what we do? How are we inspired to look at problem solving or to find new or different solutions, to the challenges we have, or in making a project work and move forward? Many times we're inspired by networking with other people, by hearing other stories. So an event like this can be amazing, and we can take a lot of that information and stories back and be inspired to start things in our own communities or in our own workplaces. Imagination, that's big. It's amazing sometimes when you listen to the example for me would be listening to kids or listening to youth. They have ideas that are beyond what we could ever imagine. But that's what I think can bring or can help with ambition and energy in how we approach our work and how we approach projects. Reframing, how do you look at a particular problem or a particular issue? Sometimes having another perspective or having somebody else help you see it in a different way can help you with finding a way forward. Mind mapping, again, that's just has to do with how do we think through things. What is the thought process that could be applied in this situation or that situation. Insight, from other people's successes, other people's failures, other people's experience. There's a lot of value in consulting with elders or just other communities. There's a lot we can learn, especially at an event like this. Innovation, how do we apply new ideas or new ways of doing things or new materials? We see a lot of, tomorrow there'll be a trade show here at the event. Probably see a lot of new materials, new construction materials, new ways of having your project move forward. Okay. Experimenting. How do you know the way something's going to turn out if you don't try? So at some point somebody had to do this or that, and hopefully we could learn. They always say it's easier to learn from other people's mistakes than our own, and that's where networking and working or being in relationship with other people can help a lot. In a housing project, if you're trying something like a slab on grade or you're trying to use structurally insulated panels, who else has done it? It's not just whatever the salesman says. That's certainly worth considering, but I think we can learn a lot from other people's experience in innovation and experimenting. Questioning, what kind of questions can we ask in any given situation? I believe that most questions or any question is fair, but do we ask the questions when we are approached with a project a project issue or a problem? Who's going to say, is this right, or is this the best way possible for our group or for our project? Design. There's how do we look at how things are built or how they'll look after the fact, and creativity can go a lot into that. If you look at housing from a government perspective, they're more concerned about how many units can be built under certain programs, and that's why you often see a square box for a house. But how can we be more creative in culturally appropriate designs, and what considerations can we take into say housing projects in that regard? So there's lots to think about. Work ethic, another area I think that is huge in how we approach work and getting things done. So work ethic are soft skills that proves your belief in the importance of work and its ability to strengthen your characteristics. And some of this has to do with the way we grew up, probably, but not always, for sure. What integrity is a consideration. What is our approach to work when it may not matter what we're doing, in the sense of people around us keeping track of everything that we're doing or watching. Responsibility, how do we look at taking on responsibility and getting things done or making sure that things are getting done? Discipline, how do we apply discipline in our lives as it relates to work or as that relates to home? Is it just things that we get paid for that are easier to apply discipline to or in? Dependability or initiation, how are we for proposing ideas or throwing stuff out there for moving forward? Dependability, another one. Can we be depended on? It's hard to depend on people when you're not sure if they're going to show up, or when they're going to show up, or if they're going to come back, that kind of thing. Big consideration, and something that we should, think about a lot. Commitment. What is our personal commitment to any given thing? What if we're given stuff that we're not really big fans of for work? How do we apply, or how do we remain committed or remain energetic or positive about those kinds of things that are part of work, or can be? Professional. How do you remain professional? Because we're human, and we often have to work in teams, so there can be challenges between personalities and our approaches to work. Some people are morning people. Some people don't function well till after lunch, and we still have to make things work. And we never know what personal issues people are carrying in having to complete their work day to day. Some of us have very difficult, challenging home situations, and yet, we're committed to work. We're committed to providing for our families, or whatever the case is. How do we account for that? Self-motivating, that's come up a number of times. In work ethic, that's huge. How do you maintain, a certain level of commitment in how you're getting work done? I think I talked about all this. Sorry. Interpersonal skills. So just another area. How do we relate? How do you relate to the people beside you, whether you have to or not? Sometimes we're put in teams where we have to get things done. So what kind of things are important to consider? So it says interpersonal skills are those that you use constantly as you interact and communicate with coworkers. And then some examples. So empathy, again, that's considering other people's situations. Could be their life situations, could be their work situations. Having a certain level of understanding for what other people's place in life might be. Humor is a big thing, and especially in First Nations culture. Humor comes easier than most everything. And that can be an important consideration in how you handle tough situations. Not that you're going to laugh things off and it doesn't mean anything, but it's important to, that's part of being human, I think. Mentoring. How do we pass on our knowledge, our skills, our experience? And what ways do we develop or have relations like that can be considered mentoring? Sensitivity. This could be sensitivity to other people's feelings, other people's work situations or home situations, and it can include things like race, identity, even sexual identity, these kinds of things. And many places these days have what they call sensitivity training. Like how do we work together in a way that we can make sure we're not excluding people or calling people out in ways that may not be acceptable for in a team and a professional environment. Patience, being patient with maybe people that are learning or people that are new, that's really important. Because how do they get the chance to learn about things or to gain experience if we're not able to be patient with them? It took me a long time to learn how to do inspections, home inspections or construction inspections, and I had to learn a lot on my own. And it's because people were patient with me as well that I was able to learn as much as I did. Tolerance. How do we tolerate differences, whether it's differences of opinion or just different people in general or people with different values? Important consideration for sure. Public speaking, that's huge. It's a skill that you can also work on over time. Like, it's said that being in front of public or in front of people is probably one of the greatest fears that humans have. But it's something that you can work on and get better at if that's a goal that you have in your life, and it can be really important. I spend a lot of time in front of people, so over time, I make myself notes and this kind of thing, like make sure you're looking at people. Don't read your document word for word necessarily. Don't hold it up. Just things like that. There's little things we can do to get better at things, and these are important skills we can have. Positive reinforcement. How do we look at a situation, as bad as it could be, and say, you know what, we have this going for us. We'll keep moving forward in this way or that way, and just how do you rally, your people or your team to keep moving forward and to remain optimistic. Time management, again, this is something that I think we've probably all come across all the time. How do we manage time? So here it says, time management skills demonstrate your ability to work efficiently and productively by using your time wisely. Something I think about this a lot because there's this idea of efficiency. So efficiency means doing the job right. And that's an important consideration. Like, are we doing this job right? And then there's this other idea of effectiveness. And that basically asks, am I doing the right job? So I can get efficient all I want, and we can get awesome at doing a job. But if we're not doing the right job, then how are we moving forward in the best way possible? Goal setting, is important in time management. How do you move through your day? I've worked in a job where I don't really catch up or finish. Were you going to say something? No? Okay. So how do you, if you always have 10 things to do and you only have time for 5, how do you pick which 5? Could be like doing laundry. Laundry probably could be at the bottom of the list for how many days? 10 days? For us, it seems like it could be a lot more. I don't know. But at some point, if you don't apply proper goal setting or prioritizing, which is the next point, you're going to find yourself in trouble. So it takes that goal setting, prioritizing. How do you set priority when you have too many things to do? Is it just always putting out fires? How do you approach work? How do you correspond with people? How do you get back to people? As far as correspondence goes. And then, so time management, being a self-starter is really important, and not, a lot of us aren't like that. We need a team. We need people to be like our cheerleaders for getting through a project, getting through a day, or getting through a weekend. Those are all important things. Planning is important. It's huge, and there's the old consideration of if you fail to plan, what are you doing? Essentially, you're planning to fail. So planning, even your day, is big. Like, what can I accomplish today? What can I do? What do I need other people to accomplish? And where we need a team rather than stuff that we can get done ourselves. Decision making. Again, we need to move forward somehow. If we're not the kind of person that likes to make a decision or likes to propose options, how do we get around people that do? That aren't afraid to speak up and say, there's 3 ways we can work right now, and let's pick one. Focus, again, that's back to that whole efficiency and effectiveness thing. How do we maintain focus? Whether it's big picture or small scale or detail perspective that we have. Stress management as well is a big thing. How do you, it's back to the other thing of self-management. How do we apply self-care in managing stress? Because if all we have is timelines, or if all we have is managers or council on our backs for getting stuff done, and we're one person or we're one department, how do you manage that, and how do you communicate effectively with those people to make sure they understand our issues or challenges? So stress management can be huge, and it's become more of an issue today, especially with different issues we come across, socioeconomic issues. Coping. How do we cope? Whether it's personally or as a team, do our workplaces have things in place to help us, whether it's with a family issue, could be a family loss, and what support can we have or offer, and how do we cope personally? What coping mechanisms do we have, whether it's default to certain things? Sometimes when we get offended, we might lash out, or we might be quiet and never say anything again. If somebody questions us in a meeting, how can we help to, not let stuff like that either happen or at least carry on in the sense that people don't want to participate? Leadership. Also a very important area. Leadership is a soft skill that enables you to lead others while you fulfill the goals and mission of your organization. So some examples: project management. There's never no end to the need to manage a project or manage a team, and whether it's somebody's appointed to do that or whether it's by self-appointment, project management is an area that we can grow in constantly and consistently. Empathy, again, we've seen that word a couple times already. If you have, aspire to leadership, how do we consider other people's feelings, other people's values, and how do we communicate that we understand, where they're coming from? Selflessness, I think sometimes is very important. How do we get done, or get through what could be challenges or difficulties in achieving, whether it's helping a community or helping a family. Sometimes it takes a bit of sacrifice and committing a lot of effort for a time period. Listening, again, we've seen that before. Humility. How do we consider the values of the project or other people's values over our own, that can see the project move forward and provide benefit to people? Cultural intelligence is huge, because I think we probably all can have had experiences where we've seen outside organizations or agencies have all the knowledge and even resources in the world, but they're not very culturally sensitive. Whether it's considering elders or the way we've done things in our region or in our community. How do we consider that? How do we make sure people are aware of those things? I've seen this kind of culture issues cause good effort to get hung up at times because either we're not aware or we just have misguided effort. Authenticity, that could mean being real, or being able to say stuff like it is in any given situation. That's important for leadership, but not in a way that tears people down in the sense of your contribution or the things you bring are not of value. It's important to be authentic in the sense of we need to be able to say stuff like how it is, but communicate as well that it's not our place to offend people personally, but that's how it is with humans at times. Being generosity, that's a consideration too in how we approach being a leader or having leadership considerations. And trust is probably one of the biggest ones for me. Do I know that I can trust somebody if they are a leader or have leadership aspirations? Attention to detail allows you to be both thorough and accurate in your work. And some of the skills that related to this are critical observations. And critical can mean kind of a negative look at like what's missing or what is making this not work like it should or not work as well as it should. Are we able to either provide that or receive that in a way that we can think of it for the value of the project or the team? Listening, again, so many of these things come up in so many ways in these different topics. Organizing, how do we catch all the details in a given project or event? It's important. Scheduling, sometimes having a visual I use a big whiteboard in my office all the time so I can write all the ideas down. I use index cards a lot for my work just because I want to look at ideas and I put them out on a table. So I always have index cards with me. Scheduling, again, the attention to detail thing. How do we make sure stuff is happening? Do we know what our deadlines are, whether it's for the project or for team members? Memory. What history is there within our team or our coworkers that we can learn from and gain from? And questioning. We've seen that before. Like, we need to ask the tough questions and even the easy questions. What are the resources? What team members can we utilize? What departments? That kind of thing. And analysis. How do we analyze, a given problem or situation as it applies to detail? I'll let you go. So we're just, I just have a couple applications of skills that may have not been covered, but that come up really often, and I've seen a lot. One area is planning a meeting. Sorry. So how do you plan a meeting, and what's important, or what is the basis for getting the most benefit from planning a meeting? So identify the purpose of the meeting. If it's a project meeting, then it's obviously to maintain and to keep everybody in the loop, whether it's council or that kind of thing. And make sure you really need the meeting. Could it be an email? So are we meeting just because, or are we going to waste people's time if we don't need to gather everybody together? Could it be, if it's being an on-site meeting is another consideration. Could it be a teleconference? Could it be a web-based conference? Do we have the ability to do those kinds of things to get people on the same meeting, whether they're in different locations? And developing an agenda. If it's a project, often it's an existing agenda, but if it's just an update meeting or something, how do we, it's important to get an agenda out and make sure if it's management that needs to, have reporting or that kind of thing, that it covers all the bases. Sending a meeting invitation. One thing that I come across is working in different time zones. How do you notify people, whether it's by emails or phone call? You need to make sure, and if it's a recurring meeting, they'll know it's like on the third Friday of the month or whatever it is. But some of our companies that we see out there might use like an email platform for scheduling meetings, but realizing not everybody out there uses the same email platform. So if you're using an app within the email platform to schedule a meeting, to somebody else that is in a different email platform, they might not get the proper information if you're using the technology of meeting planning in one. I don't know if that makes sense. One thing that I've always tried to do is make sure that all of the details of the meeting are in the email text. So don't just count on the software program to make sure that it knows the meeting's in the Eastern time zone or Central time zone, or if I'm changing time zones myself. A lot of this stuff can prevent miscommunication or missed meetings even. Select the right participants is important. Does the meeting have to involve chief and council, or the consultants, or community members? At what level people need to know about the meeting? And then sending a meeting invite. So I talked about some of that. How do you make sure people know and find out and provide feedback? And then background information. So what is it? Is there past meeting minutes people need to receive? Is there documents that will be referenced if it's a project meeting, or past reports? All of these things need to be shared. Sometimes it's a challenge to share information. If it's a document that's, a 350-page document, can't be sent by email, how do you make sure people get it? Do you have to mail stuff or ship stuff, or is there electronic ways of sharing large information or large documents? There's things like Dropbox, our company is used a lot, or Google Drive is another way. There's other ways of sharing large documents with email contacts for reference information for a meeting. Just also carrying on with this, what is the decision-making process in planning a meeting? If it's an ongoing project meeting, a lot of it is information-based, but how do we make decisions? Is it by a majority vote or group consensus where everybody has to come to an agreement? Or is it leaders' choice or management that is, running the meeting and gathering decisions and gathering opinion? Also identify and arrange for equipment needed, if we need any laptops or any kind of projectors, if somebody's doing a presentation, if it's a web-based meeting or a teleconference. There's a lot that can be involved with making a meeting happen efficiently. Finalize the agenda before the meeting and reissue if needed. So oftentimes people issue a draft agenda and ask if there's any other topics that need to be covered, and then before the meeting, just make sure that you have a finalized agenda. Can confirm important invites if needed. So if you're having a meeting, a project meeting, and suddenly you're at the meeting and the consultant's not there, they're not on the phone, things like that could have been checked in the morning or the day before to make sure, yes, we have the people that we need in the meeting to make a decision or to move forward. That's important. And prepare yourself. How do we, if we're not prepared with either the information or background information or the meeting background, like how do we help the team move forward properly? Another area is record keeping for meetings. I see often can be a gap in how we manage information or manage projects. There's different approaches to how you manage your meeting information. Meeting summaries and minutes of the meeting are quite similar in nature. It basically means summarizing the details of what the meeting has accomplished. And the difference of the two documents is that meeting summaries are less formal compared to minutes of the meeting. So minutes often say, so-and-so said this and then so-and-so said that, where a summary is kind of point form. This was discussed. Here was the direction or the decision. And just the importance of a meeting summary is for participants to remember and track the major discussion points. So again, listing that back, how it reflects the agenda, or if it's another topic, we just keep record of that separately. Record the highlights, like motions and decisions, plans for the future, identify problems and issues, how do we solve those problems and issues, reporting accomplishments. All of these things are can be part of what we see in a meeting summary. And keep a track record to see who participated or not. We might have had a list of people that we invited. There might be bunch of different people might have showed up. Where do they fit in? And how do we make sure the people that weren't there stay in the loop in the future and seeing the meeting summary? And a meeting summary is a documented source of information and reference for management or others who weren't at the meeting. So there might be a larger group of people that need to remain aware of what the meeting involved. And just how do we go about the meeting? Before the meeting, review the agenda, review the list of invited participants, confirm them if you need to. Make sure you have what you need to be able to record meeting information, whether it's a pen or a notebook or a laptop, this kind of thing. Gathering materials needed for the meeting. So again, we talked about that, whether it's reference documents, past meeting summaries, other project reports, or it could be financial information. All these are important in keeping the meeting successful. So during the meeting, decide how, your format for how the meeting summary will look, whether it's this point form, which is easier. Complete a roll call. I like to have participants write their own names, print their own names, and write their emails, because then we get spellings the right way. I just pass a piece of paper around the room, and then record it again or check it against your invited list, so you can see who was there or wasn't there, but who also needs to receive information. Do the note taking of agenda item points and other major discussion points. So that's just recording the important stuff whether it's decisions or new problems, and make sure that recaps, recap of the discussion or the decisions that are involved with the meeting. I find that's really important if there's chief and counsel in the meeting, to make sure that we're recapping what the issues are or what the way forward is. And if somebody joins the meeting late and it's somebody like a council member or something, I usually will do a quick recap. Here's what we talked about so far. Here's what needs decisions, and then keep moving forward. But it's important to recap for everybody. This is what we talked about. This is who needs to do what, and then that also becomes part of the meeting summary. So carrying on just with more information. Just some of this is just details. When did the meeting actually start? Did it start half an hour later? Why? So you can, for next time, you can say, you know what, we need to start on time, whether it could be people are leaving on a flight or they're on a schedule for leaving, so it's hard. We have to make sure we get through the meeting properly, or we have the proper amount of time. Who led the meeting? It could be different if there's a different person than usual. Is the attendee list different than the invited list? Make sure we track that kind of stuff. What time the meeting ended, so we can know for future meetings perhaps how much time do we need for this kind of stuff. And if we take on new topics, new items, are we setting aside the amount of time we need? Proposing the next meeting date. Make sure you know whether it's your job or anybody else's job in the meeting. Make sure you know when the next meeting is that you agree upon, or provide alternatives. Don't just say, we'll get back to you about the next meeting, because it's easier for people, or it's harder for people oftentimes to follow up or make sure that gets into their schedule. Say, could be 4 weeks or 5 weeks from now on the Tuesday or the Friday or whatever, but provide options at the meeting, and the location. Oftentimes, some meetings can have to be on site, other meetings can be a teleconference or a web-based conference. How many people have used web-based meeting applications? Not too many. I've used a few. One that I've used is called Zoom, and it is a web-based. All you have to do is click a link. You don't need to download software. You can connect on your phone or a laptop that has access to the internet. The one feature I like about Zoom is that if somebody's only has a phone or they don't have internet, they can call in and they'll be connected into the exact same meeting. So you're not trying to call somebody on the phone over here. You're looking at somebody on a screen over here from the web-based. And there's other applications out there. But it's important, if you're getting involved with those kinds of things, or council is invited or management's invited to participate in those things, if you're an organizer, make sure you check things out beforehand to make sure it works. If you need speakers or if you need mics, these kinds of things are important to know ahead of time, because you don't want to delay the meeting a half hour because we're not up to speed with our technology or being prepared. Often, summary document, if you're making a meeting summary, this is the kind of stuff that I like to see. Just the meeting name, could be a project name, community name, whatever it is, location, date, attendees list. But on the meeting information, this is kind of how I like to see, and what I see a lot of other people use that works well is, it's kind of a table approach, but you're numbering the agenda topics, and the numbers reflect the agenda, and then you're recording the discussion, whatever the points might be. But this is really important here on the far right, is how do you ensure follow-up? How do you ensure that people are going to do what they said or agreed to do, and it's recorded. And it could be multiple people. It could be, I usually use initials, but it's important for follow-up. How do you make sure things are getting done by the next meeting or within a week or whatever the case, the discussion might be. After the meeting, again, produce the document as soon as you can. Get it out, and ask for updates if there's mistakes or missing information. Ask for that kind of thing. And then complete the follow-up, whether it's updating for clarity or mistakes, or follow-up in the sense of so-and-so agreed to do this in the meeting, so we need to make sure that that's followed up on, whether it's you or management or that kind of thing. Just keep everybody in the loop. I think that's it. Are there any questions? You did ask questions along the way, so that's fine. I know it's been a long day already. Thank you for listening, and there's a lot of great stuff ahead in the next 2 days.